Oh, I think we are being live streamed now on YouTube. So with that, I'll call this very special joint council meeting of the Township of Augusta and the Town of Prescott to order. It's strange doing that. Don't do that at home in these Zoom meetings. It feels odd. So I'd like to welcome everyone. And I guess at the start of the meeting, I'll actually hold off on the introductions till we get into the opening statements. And I'd like to go around the table if everyone's okay with that, just to get quick opening comments from everybody with both councils tonight. So we'll go right to calling the meeting to order, and item 3 is approval of the agenda. And I will note, I'm essentially serving as the chair tonight because we're hosting, but it's really Doug and I are sharing the chair, but we want to make this a friendly dialogue meeting regardless. So don't think of formality here or anything. And please feel free to get your opinions and your voices heard through the course of the evening. So we really want to have this as a nice friendly conversation between two great friends and municipalities. So we'll move on to item 3, approval of the agenda. And the recommendation reads that the agenda of the joint council meeting of the Township of Augusta and the Town of Prescott be approved as presented. Could I ask for a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Ostrander, seconded by Councillor Bowman. I'm sorry, Michelle.
Okay.
Any discussion on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Item 4, declarations of interest. Going to guess no declarations of interest around the table this evening. And that takes us right through to item 5. We do have an opening statement tonight. I'd like to welcome our local MPP and Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Steve Clark, beaming in, I think, all the way from Brockville this evening. Steve, great to have you with us. We talked about doing this 3 or 4 times, I think, in the last couple of years, but we haven't been able to do it because of COVID. So it's great to have you here this evening to give us some words of welcome. So please, the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I hope you guys can hear me okay. You're right. I'm talking to you from my dining room in Brockville. I've just been on my normal Monday carousel of Zoom meetings and Microsoft Teams meetings. I just got off a cabinet committee, and I appreciate you giving me a couple of minutes at the start of your agenda just to talk about this historic meeting. And I want to, first of all, thank you, Mayor Todd, and also Mayor Malanka, both of your councils and both of your municipal staff for seeing the benefits of the Municipal Modernization Fund. When I created this fund back in 2019, it was as a result of the discussions we had on the regional government review. And what we decided was no matter what corner of the province you had, you should be able to make local decisions. So what we did was we created the Municipal Modernization Fund for Ontario's small, rural and northern communities, all 405. And the projects that we really looked at were projects that looked at shared service agreements, looked at delivering a municipal service in a different way. COVID-19's taught us that we need to have a reflection on the services we deliver to our constituents.
No.
Speaker delivering, sir.
Provide as much value as possible. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for your vision. We're using the experiences that we're seeing in Prescott and Augusta for other municipalities to encourage them to work together, not just on economic development, on housing initiatives, recreation initiatives, shared services, directing of digital services. Obviously, the conversation I'm having about housing, we need to do a better job in streamlining development approval so we get shovels in the ground faster. But I just want to say how proud I am of you, Mayor Todd, and you, Mayor Malanka, for your vision and your two councils' vision to work together. And this is really something that I want to preach to all communities. You guys get it. You understand how important it is. And I just wanted to come at the start of your meeting just to thank you. Really, you've done such a tremendous job. So that's my message. So.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Clark, and thank you again for that modernization funding that made all this possible. We've really gone a long ways down the road there to utilizing that money, and COVID's kind of slowed us down a touch, but not too much. As you can see by the energy in this room tonight, we're going to tackle this, and we're going to hopefully do some great things in these next few months. So I will turn it over to Mayor Malanka. Any comments?
Well, just to thank you, and you're absolutely right. It's the modernization money that helped spur this along.
The effort to try and form a partnership is not new. It goes back in 2010 when I was elected as a councillor. The three communities worked together through the Chamber of Commerce to try and improve economic development, or rather the ECDEV in tourism. And it was very successful. We learned a lot, learned the things that need to be attended to, but it was a really good learning. When we were elected in 2018, we started very early in the term to have discussions about how we could move this along. And then COVID came along and really put the kibosh on a lot. And Minister, it is that modernization fund that not only spurred interest back, but funded it. And it has led us to be, have been capable of this study, which is really, the key is the fact that it is a roadmap for the path forward, and with an awful lot of identification of the opportunities, challenges, and the whole thing that councillors are going to have to look at. I really am excited for us moving forward with this direction. It's obviously going to go to the next council, but we're setting the groundwork here, and I'm hopeful that the work will continue.
Thank you very much, Mayor Malenko. I'll open it up if anyone else has any comments to start us off while the minister is still on the line. Seeing none. So I do want to thank you again, Steve, for taking time out tonight to stop in our meeting and give us those words of encouragement. Thanks for all the teamwork that you've offered us as we've gone down this road of modernization, improving our efficiencies, and working together with our good friends in Augusta. As Doug mentioned, it's been a great partnership, really since the day I came in as mayor. We've had a tremendous partnership with Augusta, and we're just kind of taking it to the next level now, in large part due to that modernization funding. So thank you again, Minister, and great for you to join us tonight, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Yeah, thanks. And again, I look forward to continuing to work with two fantastic mayors and two fantastic councils. And I look forward to, as we're continue opening gradually, that we can actually get together in person. So I look forward to seeing all of you very soon. But just thanks for all your great work. You're top in my books when it comes to this fund. So all the best. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much, Steve. Take care. All the best. And moving on, so that moves us right to part 6 this evening, item 6, opening statements from myself and Mayor Malenko. I'll turn it over to Mayor Malenko for any opening comments.
Okay, thanks. And with our back comments to Mr. Clark, kind of got into what I wanted to cover off. And that's the way it happens in meetings. You put some notes down and you work it in as it goes. So personally, I'm really pleased that we're at this point being where we've got the money to do the study. We've got now, essentially, as I suggested it is a roadmap going forward, and lots of tremendous number of ideas and opportunities for us. When I talk about a partnership, I think I like to repeat something that I've said a few times, that this is not towards an amalgamation, nor is it towards an annexation. It is a true partnership because the partners who have had the discussions believe firmly that we can achieve everything that could be achieved in an amalgamation or annexation in a partnership, and we still retain the quality and characteristic of our individual municipalities. And with that, the note that I wanted to put down for any residents of Augusta that are listening is that I have been consistent in my discussions with Prescott that my aim is to essentially protect and promote the agricultural culture of this municipality of Augusta. We're expecting that we want to have the development that's needed to replace the jobs that disappeared as industry that we knew it in the past left. But at the same time, I know that it's important that we maintain that sense of this being an agricultural community. And so that is something that will be a filter in front of my eyes. And I trust my council has heard me say it enough. So I think it's something that they've at least thought about. And to this extent, I think that they agree. Also, what I've had consistent with my discussions with my colleagues in Prescott is an absolute statement that we're going to go forward with trust and fairness. And this is essential to our reaching goals and keeping the partnership alive. And I just know that if there's any effort to try and kind of outdo the other, or not deal with it in an equitable way, then it is a sure way of ending something that could be good very quickly. So as I'm saying, trust and fairness is absolutely key to this. In any of our discussions, when you read the report, you'll see that our consultants made a point of looking and telling us of municipalities who had gone through this kind of thing, or at least related to the sharing of water sewage. It may have stopped there, but we have some examples to look at, and it's clear that we're going to be having to look at ourselves. And I think as long as we stay true to the cause, there's no limit to which we can grow both communities. This is the betterment of both communities, and I think we can do it both just the way the report is set up, individually and jointly. So I'll leave it there and see if anybody else from my council, if you don't mind.
I thought I'd just make my quick comments and then we'll begin with the Augusta councilors and give everyone a chance to. I don't really have much to add to that though, quite frankly. Welcome to the beginning. Really, even though we've been doing the prep stages on this for, well, it seems like 100 years now, actually with COVID, but I think it's just over a year, but it's good prep work. We've got a whole lot of homework that's been done with MDB. This is, if anybody is watching out there, this is just the thin edge of the wedge. It's actually about that much documentation for both municipalities. So some good homework, some good data, some really good information that we have to help inform some of our discussions. But essentially, tonight is the start of that personal dialogue. We're all friends, we're all neighbors. And that's what we need to bring to these tables and these discussions to make sense of what we've got here, because the whole point of this is to improve our economy, I think to grow our population as well. And I'll have just a little bit more to say on that in a moment. But overall, it's about improving our quality of life here for all residents in Augusta and in Prescott. And I think we can do that with some very simple low-hanging fruit measures like sharing services like we have with municipal vehicles that we've shared between the two municipalities the last little while. And then the larger steps when it comes to syncing up, when it comes to planning, policy, procedures on things that will help us facilitate better housing development and better economic development with industry and commerce. And of course, recreation. We've got that wonderful arena going up right now, right near the Augusta border in our northwest corner. We've all seen how quickly that's going up. That's a great testimony to the success of this partnership and how much two municipalities can do when they work together. That rink is a huge success. We have another project that hopefully we've worked on that we hopefully can announce very soon as well. So it's all going very well in the background. We've seen that. The only things I will mention, and we'll get more into this obviously later, the main thing I would suggest, just from my own perspective, housing has to be a big focus. We have a huge opportunity here right now with what's happened with the with COVID, with working from home, with people that migration out of the cities. People want to live in communities like ours right now, and we have to do all we can to encourage them to make that move and encourage the developers to start building those homes here. There's tremendous opportunity right in our border with Augusta that we can service. There are other avenues even further into Augusta, I think, maybe that we can immediately service, but we can certainly help support as shared projects. We've already seen what we can do when we endorse grant applications to the province. Maybe lending our support to certain things where a neighborhood in Augusta, a little farther from our borders, but maybe we can still lend support there and help get provincial dollars there to help those builds. So housing to me is the bedrock of what we need to do, because if we don't grow as a community, we're not going to be able to attract the industry, the commerce. Everything depends on that. And we've been stagnant for a long time. 25 plus years of virtually zero growth in most of Leeds-Grenville. We've got to turn that around. And I think we can turn that around right here in Augusta and Prescott with what we're doing here tonight. So that's my little bit of soapbox speech to start the evening. So I will go to Augusta and we'll just go around the table, and apologies again to Councillor Bowman. I think in first names with this stuff, and I get brainwalked at times. So Michelle, please, any opening remarks this evening?
No, you guys pretty much said it all. I'm looking, forward to see what we can do as a joint committee.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Thanks for having us tonight, and I look forward to more partnerships and projects in the future.
Thank you so much. Deputy Mayor Shaver.
I echo both chairs' comments, and I think this is a great positive step, a positive first step. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And we'll go to our side of the table and start with Councillor Burton. Any opening remarks, please?
Thank you. I'm definitely looking forward to this great partnership. I think both of our municipalities are on the same path. So not only for businesses, but for our residents as well. So I'm looking forward to doing some great brainstorming here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. First off, I'd just like to say it's nice to be able to see my own council in the flesh rather than on TV. And certainly the folks across the way from Augusta as well. People walking around with masks these days, half the time you don't know who they are until they speak. And I happen to be one of those people that is good with voices. So that's the way it goes. I think Doug mentioned that this started back in 2010, and I remember being out at Augusta Council with yourself, and I think Ray was there, and with your council, and we had a good discussion. It didn't get to anything to the point where we are now, though. And I think what a lot of people, especially if they're not involved in council, don't realize is that without government support, there's a lot of stuff that we just wouldn't be able to do. And this whole study, this whole report is funded by the provincial government. So it didn't cost us anything, but we are certainly going to reap the benefits of it as long as we can stay cooperative over the next few years. And Doug made another good point that we shouldn't be looking to try and gain an advantage over each other. It's a cooperative effort, and you should be looking at what you can get out of it, not what you can thump out of the other person. And I think as long as we maintain that attitude, I think with the two councils that we have now, that's the way it will go. And so I think we're on a good path here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ostrander.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, it's nice to get together with our counterparts from Augusta. You know, with COVID, we don't even see them now, let alone anybody else. So it's nice to put this meeting together that we can discuss these things. In the document, I noticed there's several pieces in here that have come up before in one way or shape or another. And it's nice to see all of it in one package that you can attack it sort of and see where you want to go and what steps you want to take to get to where you're going. So hopefully this is the first of many meetings that we can put together and see where it's going to take us and where our priorities are, I guess. And we're going to hear that from our speakers here tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ostrander. Councillor Shankar.
Thank you. It is, I'm going to say the same. It's great to see everybody. And I really was looking forward to having everyone involved, you know. The more brains around the table, the more ideas that can come up. Like Councillor Burton said, looking forward to good dialogue. One thing that Mayor Malanka said about, I think I even wrote down, trust and fairness. And I think us being here today all together, staff included on both sides, I think that bodes well for this committee and this joint council meeting. I'm really looking forward to it. You know, someone else mentioned that there's going to be different levels of bonus for each group. Augusta is going to benefit in certain ways. Prescott's going to benefit in certain ways. I think it's important not to try and measure that against each other, but just for each individual or each council. We want certain things, you guys want certain things. As long as we both are happy with it, we'll both succeed. You know, already so far, the low-hanging fruit has been successful. Our joint bid for the recreational center that we're all going to enjoy has been successful. You know, there's more projects that we're in on together that we're waiting to hear, but I think we can do a lot of good with this committee. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shankar. And Councillor Young.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. Speaking 10th, it's difficult to come up with a different point of view, but I'm very glad that we're holding the meeting, and I apologize for not being there. I'm suffering with a bad back, and I have a note from my doctor that says I should sit at home and take it easy.
Doctor or chiropractor?
Well, Dr. Chiropractor is.
Dr. Chiropractor? Thanks very much, Ray. I will note also before we move on tonight, we do have two counselors that are absent this evening that sent regrets. Counselor Teresa Jansman from Prescott, and Counselor Samantha Schapelhuman from Augusta. So we are moving on without them tonight regretfully, but we know they'll be part of the discussions as we go forward. So thanks everyone for such great opening words. And with that, we will move on to the meat of tonight's agenda, and starting off with presentations. We do have MDB Insight on the line here with a number of their team. Mr. Armstrong, basically turning this over. Mr. Blaze right now, or do you have any preamble from staff? We haven't heard from staff yet this evening, and you and your counterpart from Augusta, of course, been a huge part of this and all these meetings. Anything from either CAO this evening before we turn it over to Mr. Blaze?
The intro is that we're pleased to bring this forward to both councils, and look forward to really delving into some of the opportunities that it provides, while also at the same time really benefiting all of the residents of both municipalities and their self-government. So I think with that in mind, I'm more than happy to pass it over to my counterpart.
Appreciate the welcome that I received in my kind of short time so far in Augusta, but I hope I can bring some value from my past experience to working with Prescott. Prescott staff, Matt's been great, and certainly look forward to good things to come over the next few years.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you both for the work you put into this. It's obviously doesn't happen with the good hard work without the good hard work of staff behind the scenes, and you both have been there lately. In particular, Steve, you're kind of just joining us, but you haven't fled the area yet, so it looks like it's going well, and our folks in Prescott haven't scared you off. So thanks for joining the roundtable. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Blaze. Paul, have you on the line, and a number of members of your team tonight. My eyesight is not the greatest looking across the room here, so squinting, but I think we've got all MDB Insight team there. But Paul, if you want to take us away, we are going to do a presentation on some of the main items that we've identified so far, and then we'll move into a more focused discussion. Paul, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. A pleasure to be here tonight, Mayor Malenka as well, and your team, your council and staff from Augusta. It's a real treat to be with you tonight and to provide this presentation on the project. Guess would like to reflect congratulations to both municipalities for moving forward together. I think we don't see it as often as we'd like to see in our work. Oftentimes parochialism and local opinion get in the way of true partnerships. So the words around the table tonight have been really inspiring. Congratulations. And I'm pleased that our work is going to help you move that forward. We have, of course, myself and Clark Hoskin, a senior consultant with MDB Insight, and three of our partners. This was a complex project that required a number of specialists, and so we have Marco Vincelli from EVB Engineering. We have Nico Church from Foten Planning and Design, and we have Kieran Hunt from FBM. All of us have taken our skills and added it to the mix. I'm going to start off the presentation, then turn it over to Nico, Marco, and Kieran to go through the land needs analysis. Clark will then speak to the Joint Economic Development Action Plan, and then I'll do a wrap, and we'll be available as you wish for questions, answers, comments.
I think we could probably divide it up then if you're going to tackle it in that order, and we'll have comments right after each presentation, if that's good, just so we can focus on those items. We can probably handle it all like that, and then have room for other focused discussion afterwards. So if we'll just pause after each segment of the presentation and open it up for everyone to ask questions.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, Mayor Todd. I'll pause after the land needs analysis, and then we'll talk, and then we'll go through the economic development strategy, or joint economic development strategy. Okay, I'll share my screen, and I hope that it's visible. I understand that everyone has received these slides in advance, so If you can't see them, I hope that you might have available in some other form, but here we are. If you don't mind confirming that you can see this cover slide.
Yep, you're sharing the screen. I think everybody has a copy of the presentation as well, so I think we're good to go.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Okay, a quick project overview. I mean, we've had the pleasure, of course, of being in front of each council individually, so I'm sure that you're all fully aware of the project. The deliverables included separate economic development strategies for the Township of Augusta and Town of Prescott. There's a land development needs analysis for the Township of Augusta and Town of Prescott, which looked at two focus areas, geographical focus areas. One was a larger, I guess start with the smaller territory. It was started off to being the north of the Town of Prescott, north end of Town of Prescott and into Augusta Township north of the 401, and then a larger study area that covered from Prescott all the way over to Maitland. And then the fourth deliverable, is a joint economic development action plan for the Township of Augusta and Town of Prescott. So this was intended to examine the action plans in each of the individual strategies and see, well, what the municipalities should be working together on, what are most likely to be successful being worked on together. As Mayor Todd did say, it does feel like the project has gone on for a considerable period of time, but it's all went smoothly thanks to the staff members of your municipalities. So thank you for that, Matthew, Dana, and Stephen. We are now in phase 4. Essentially, how do we get there? You know, this is the difference between the investigation of where the socioeconomic position of the communities is now and where the aspirations of the community want to take the communities. All right, I will now hand it over to Nico. Nico, I'll move the slides for you, and if I don't catch on, just give me a kind prompt.
Sounds like a plan, Paul. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you to both councils, to your worships for the opportunity to speak today. The land needs and service delivery analysis was prepared in response to the provincial policy statement, which requires for municipalities to provide an appropriate mix and range of employment to meet the long-term needs of both municipalities. To meet this requirement, both municipalities must ensure an adequate supply of land and favorable zoning and servicing to allow intensification of existing lands that may be suitable for employment uses. The land needs study looks at short-term commercial and employment opportunities as well as residential development opportunities. Further to discussions with stakeholders, it was deemed to be a very important economic driver, as was previously mentioned. There's an important opportunity to be had here with the COVID situation and opportunities to provide housing for people who may be interested in living in the area. Next slide, please. So the study incorporated quite a few steps, including a broad overview of the study area and the focus area that were outlined by the municipalities, which I'll get to in a second. A review of applicable studies and policies, including official plans, zoning bylaws, community improvement plans, servicing city studies, MTO guidelines, and so on and so forth. We also reviewed vacant underutilized lands that were identified by the municipalities that could be developed. We took a close look at servicing and utility conditions. We undertook a SWOT analysis of both the focus area as well as a second focus area that I'll get to in a few minutes, from market demand, land use, and infrastructure perspectives. We engaged in consultations with stakeholders and utility providers. We looked at the short-term demand forecasting for the area. And we wrapped up with possible development options and planning and infrastructure implementation steps. Next slide. So the municipalities outlined both a study area and an area of focus. So the study area consists of lands bound by Maitland Road, or County Road 15 to the west, St. Lawrence River to the south, County Road 26 to the north, and the municipal boundaries of Augusta and Prescott to the east. The lands vary in nature. They include the town of Prescott itself, which is quite dense compared to the rest of the area, as well as a few settlements in Augusta, including Maitland, Maynard, and Riverview Heights. But the majority of the lands are rural in nature and are either vacant or occupied with low intensity uses. The focus area consists of lands within Prescott and Augusta that are really just to the north of the town of Prescott. So you've got Highway 401 to the south, Merwin Lane to the west, Prescott's boundary to the east, and McIntosh Road, County Road 26 to the north. And it's about 170 hectares in size. In the focus area, there's a variety of uses, some residential, some commercial and service industries in institution as well. For instance, there's an OPP station in the area. So quite a variety of low density uses. Next slide, please. So one of the things we did was we took a look at several local, regional, and provincial policies to determine opportunities relating to future development. So for instance, what these maps show are from some of the policies that were prepared for the municipalities that show a variety of environmental constraints. And that's something that needed to be kept in mind, both for the study and moving forward, in that these lands are largely rural and you will have constraints relating to provincially significant wetlands, significant woodlands, source water protection areas, and the like. So these areas are quite large in nature, but not every square inch is developable. So we needed to take a look at what have the best characteristics. Moving on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we took a look at a variety of sites as directed or through our conversations with municipal staff of both township and privately owned parcels in both Prescott and Augusta, varying in size and condition. And we came up with quite a substantial inventory of these lands. Moving on to the next slide. We reviewed several criteria relating to these lands, including their size, their existing use, their zoning and official plan designation, the roads on which they fronted, infrastructure and servicing conditions as well. And based on all this information, as well as on known market demand, we reviewed their development potential as being high, medium, or low. Moving on to the next slide. Marco, would you like to speak to the servicing conditions?
Thank you, Nico. As part of the land need study, our team reviewed the existing municipal water and wastewater infrastructure in the town of Prescott and assessed its ability to service the additional growth we were reviewing as part of this study. The Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks provides a tool to assess the uncommitted reserve capacity for water and wastewater treatment plants. By using this tool, it was determined that the water treatment plant in Prescott can provide servicing for an additional 1,486 equivalent households, and the wastewater treatment plant has the capacity to service an additional 806 equivalent households throughout its distribution and collection systems. Aside from those two treatment plants, we looked at the water storage capacity within this town of Prescott's water system. And it was identified that the existing elevated tower does not provide sufficient storage when combined with the storage that is provided at the Prescott water treatment plant to meet the requirements of the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. The town is in the process of making an application for funding for the replacement of this water tower and to address the deficiency in water storage provided within its system. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Marco. So we undertook a SWOT analysis to start with the focus area, which I previously described was just to the north of Highway 401. And we were reviewing, we were undertaking the SWOT analysis specifically for the purpose of extending servicing from Prescott into lands within the Township of Augusta. We determined that alternative servicing extension options should actually be explored instead of servicing northward from Prescott into Augusta. The lands in the current focus area are subject to several constraints, including natural heritage features. The proximity to Highway 401 also causes limited driveway and street creation opportunities. So there would be a lack of connectivity between this area and the built-up area to the south of Highway 401. There are also higher costs associated with extending services across the highway of over $75,000 per unit. So in the long run, it adds up to quite a bit. We instead decided to look at an alternative area where we could extend servicing. Next slide, please. So we decided to look at extending the servicing west from Prescott into the eastern edge of Augusta to lands bounded by Bradley's Creek to the north, the St. Lawrence River to the south, the town boundary, the Prescott and Augusta Township boundary to the east, and Merwin Lane to the west. And this is about 90 hectares in size. This is likely to be a much more cost-efficient option, with potential future developments being more affordable, again, since it's avoiding going underneath Highway 401 to extending servicing. This would also allow for better connectivity. There are several existing streets in Prescott that could be naturally extended westward to create for a more complete community with easier access to existing amenities, particularly in Prescott's downtown core. So with all this in mind, we recommend that lands in Augusta to the west of Prescott be considered the preferred focus area for the purposes of considering extending municipal services. Next slide, please.
As previously indicated by Minister Clark, there are many examples of shared services between municipalities in Ontario. The land need study that we have provided to you identifies the critical components that are required in one of these agreements. It also provides an overview of the 4 other example shared service agreements that have been put in place for water and/or wastewater systems in Ontario. The town of Prescott currently has one shared service agreement in place with the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal for the provision of water service in the new Wexford and Johnstown Industrial Park. The municipality should initiate discussions regarding the preparation of a draft shared service agreement to have in place so that development within this recommended eastern boundary of the Township of Augusta can occur. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thanks very much. We were tasked with looking at the commercial, industrial, light industrial, predominantly demand forecasts and how those can affect the overall strategy for land use. And the first task that we looked at was the commercial trade area, which is the map you see on your screen there, looking at where the predominant percentage or source of customer patronage for the community is. And we put Prescott as the centroid for that analysis. And this is respecting where people will do the majority of their shopping to destinations outside of this trade area. So the area of influence, if you will. And that approximate 20,000 residents, which is a nice benchmark and somewhere that we can certainly grow from. We also looked in our analysis at historic growth rates, but also realized that we need to look with a bit more of a progressive lens. So we've applied some conservative, positive growth rates to the future, respectful of future opportunities for housing that will themselves increase demand. And through our analysis, we decided to take a lens of 10 years out, factoring in both a triangulation of not just population growth, but also labor and employment growth, because as we know, if you can't find the labor, you won't be able to facilitate and accommodate that demand. So our analysis resulted in an approximate 10-year demand of retail of about 167,000 or just under 170,000 square feet of retail space. That includes some unmet residual demand that we assessed there being today currently that could be captured. And that amount of land would need about 13 to 15 acres. And some of that would be infill, some of that would be new development. And we identified in the following screen, you'll see where that's allocated. Office demand is a very limited piece. The office market is not as strong, and in a suburban location and remote location like this, it would be strategic that some of the office might take some of that retail space. It might fall within some of the light industrial, or it could also be home-based businesses. The industrial, again, predominantly looking at the light industrial segment, is just under 100,000 square feet or requiring 10 acres. Industrial demand is very susceptible to significant economic drivers, some of which we can't account for. But when we look at the employment growth forecasts, we're being conservative in this estimate of 100,000, again, over the near term. It doesn't reflect what could be catalytic effects of all of these in stimulating growth above and beyond. Next slide, please. What we wanted to achieve through our analysis was an equitable allocation of that market demand that's based on the strengths and opportunities and assets of each respective community. And as you can see in the allocation, retail, because Prescott has its downtown and we're very sensitive to the downtown urban core, is going to continue having that infill and building upon the concentration of retail activity that already is there today. It's important that we consider not diluting the strengths, but rather concentrating activity and demand. And retailers will want to gravitate to where existing facilities are. That being said, we realize that in conjunction with what Nico spoke to in terms of focusing some of that growth to the west, there are opportunities there that are in conjunction with the rec center, the aqua world, and residential growth that will facilitate additional community commercial or other retail that's supportive of smaller scale, but supportive nonetheless of those growth dynamics. Similarly, office, very small amount, but allocated between the two respective communities as infill, largely infill development, or in the case of Augusta would be probably part of a business park component. And you can see with the industrial, there's a fair share allocation to Prescott, realizing that it has an existing business park and component of light industrial. But the focus of the light industrial growth would be towards Augusta, towards the west, and building upon the energy and again, focusing the value of what's already there in conjunction with creating the nearby population base in the west. So what we've tried to do again is allocate based on those strengths and assets that each community has for the right type of space and accommodating demand over this near term.
Thank you, Karen. So our land needs study presents a variety of development options. For the sake of this joint council meeting, I'll focus on the focus area that we initially identified to the north, and then the preferred focus area to the west. So the focus area to the north of Prescott, we're not necessarily saying should not be developed at all. What we're saying is perhaps the extension of services should be looked at elsewhere. For the focus area to the north of Prescott, they can continue to develop on a limited basis with rural privately serviced development patterns as currently the case in that area. In terms of the preferred focus area, the extension of municipal services west of Prescott into Augusta, really provide an opportunity to build new residential and commercial and industrial lands. So the image on this slide shows a very broad brush concept that shows lands in yellow as new residential neighborhoods and the lands in purple as business park uses. Now, the residential lands provide a great opportunity to introduce new residential typologies that would provide a greater mix of housing choices in the area, which would make housing more affordable and more available to a variety of populations that the partner municipalities are trying to attract and retain, such as skilled labor that is entering the workforce, as well as retirees who maybe want to move away from the hustle and bustle of nearby big cities, or also retirees who are local and who want to stay but want to downsize. So for instance, in the residential housing market in Ottawa, we're seeing these new residential typologies like stacked townhouses or back-to-back townhouses or real lane townhouses that are providing a bit of a missing middle between large detached homes and smaller apartment units. So this greenfield development could provide a great opportunity to, again, provide for a greater flexibility of housing choices in the area. In terms of the business park uses, this would be a great opportunity also to explore synergies with the existing Prescott Industrial Park just to the east, and to introduce some complementary commercial uses. For instance, more and more in industrial parks, we're starting to see uses such as microbreweries that have become quite popular. This is just one example of many that could really help bring, again, a synergy of uses. It should be noted we should probably look at only light industrial uses in this area, given its proximity to possible future and existing residential uses. Next slide, please. In terms of implementation, I'll speak a little bit to planning approvals that would be required, and then I'll pass it off to Marco to speak to servicing and infrastructure implementation steps. In terms of planning approvals, official plan and zoning bylaw amendments would be required. The lands within the preferred focus area are currently a designated settlement area, which is a good thing. But generally speaking, development in Augusta is usually seen as being more rural in nature. And so there are rural development standards, which is understandable given how Augusta has developed so far. But these lands would be serviced, would have a higher density, and would need to reflect a flexibility in terms of the permitted uses. Again, several different types of townhouses could be an example, as well as smaller lots that could accommodate these more affordable uses. Some level of land assembly would obviously be required to in order to entertain this vision. Marco, could you please speak to any infrastructure implementation steps?
Thank you. The ability to provide municipal water and wastewater servicing will encourage growth along the eastern boundary of the Township of Augusta with the Town of Prescott. By providing municipal services, the lot sizes can be smaller, as Nico had indicated, and development will become more dense and reduce the cost of the development and the cost to provide the housing in the area. Depending on how the municipalities want this area to be developed, there may be some environmental assessment studies that can take place right away in order to provide a template on how the area will be developed, or the municipalities can leave it in the hands of the developers through the subdivision application process. For the transportation improvements, of course, they will help spur on more development within the area by providing access to land more readily. The construction of a service road on the north side and the south sides of the Highway 401 will permit access to more properties, which will encourage development in those areas. A new 401 interchange was proposed at Blue Church Road to permit easier access to the proposed business park in the Township of Augusta on Blue Church Road. There is an environmental assessment currently underway for this stretch of the 401 between Brockville and the Highway 401, being done by the Ministry of Transportation. The Township should continue to lobby through this process to look for these upgrades on Blue Church Road. All of the transportation projects in this area are going to be occurring on privately held lands. So they will require an environmental assessment to be completed if they are to be carried out by the municipalities. The land need study provides cost estimates for all of the proposed infrastructure in this area. There is a cost benefit for both municipalities for the sharing of water and wastewater services based on the simple ideology of economies of scale, where you share the fixed costs of providing these services over a larger population base. So in the end, both municipalities will stand to benefit from the service extensions from the west of Prescott into Augusta. Paul, I'd like to turn it over to you for some final thoughts on the land development, that land need study.
Oh, you're on mute, Paul.
Thanks, Nico. Thanks, Nico, Marco, Kieran, for delivering that. I'll stop sharing slides now, and as Mayor Todd suggested, can open it up for some Q&A on this section of work.
Thanks very much, Paul, and your team. You've unpacked it's a lot of information there. You've managed to compress into a really, really good to the point presentation. So thank you so much for that. So we'll open it up for comments, questions, and I'll turn it over to Mayor Malenka with him and his council. So any comments, questions from the Augusta side of the meeting this evening?
Thank you so much, Mayor Todd. I'm going to do what I do at council meetings and speak last. So I'll ask my council if there's any questions or comments that you have coming in. Discussion so far. All right, then let me throw out a few, and you can jump in if you have something. I guess I'm going to throw out some observations, and I'm looking for you to comment and tell me either I'm right or I'm wrong. But I mean, this has been a subject that I've been trying to get completely my mind around as to helping me to find out what's the best path both for Augusta. And as I said, given the commitment to make certain that anything we're doing is also to the fairness of Prescott to understand it. In terms of your slide on page 8, which is the environmental scan, you see the different overlaps there. And one of the things that's very prominent in the Augusta official plan and that of the counties, which Augusta has to be in lockstep with, is a high level of identification of aggregate lands. And out of recent discussions at the counties, there is some wiggle room that I've discovered being talked about. And it's essentially that the government has a provision in the legislation that says if the lands are designated as aggregate lands and they're not necessarily of the highest quality, then a benefit study can be determined that would demonstrate that the potential use for development would be far greater than the use of the aggregate as a resource to Ontario. Then you can start having conversations with the counties to amend the official plan to enable you to go there. And likewise, we're finding with the emphasis of the Conservative government on getting homes built, there seems also be in different provisions, whether it's dealing with the conservation authorities, that there are provisions where ministers can step in and have things move a little more quickly, let's just say. So the question I have, if I'm not wrong in those things, is in your study, did you consider those things? And sorry, there's one other that I'll mention, is one of the things that we're exploring is looking at, with regard to these layers of limitations, the settlement boundaries, and asking ourselves the question, if we move those boundaries around to include areas near the boundary, near the settlement area, that could be developed, and thereby we're looking at whether or not there's any value, and if we can make certain that we're not upsetting any residents, to look at changing those resident or those settlement area boundaries. So that has to do with those layering that is on page 8. And did you take that in consideration? And have I got any of it wrong?
So Yeah, I figured it would be best for me to field that question. As I recall, in terms, starting first with the aggregate, I do recall looking at the official plan schedules for Augusta and thinking, my goodness, there is a lot of aggregate here, or a lot of aggregate potential, if you will. As I recall, this is drawing on a document that was reviewed a few months ago. But as I recall, there were varying levels of, I suppose, value and importance to different aggregate sites. So some have a greater development potential in terms of being developed as aggregates. Others perhaps less so. Certainly, if studies are in place to determine that there is a greater value of redesignating something, then that is there are mechanisms in place to amend the official plan. So if there are studies that are in place that take a look at that, certainly I could see that redesignation making sense. In terms of the second question, adjustments to settlement area boundaries. As a general rule, as I recall, settlement area boundaries are usually identified and evaluated when there is an official plan review, which generally speaking, under the Ontario Planning Act is supposed to be done every 5 years or so. There are some exceptions, but usually every 5 years. And that's an opportunity for the municipality to take a close look at census data, at population projections, at a variety of other data sources to determine, do we need to expand our settlement area boundaries? So if there is research that shows that Augusta or Prescott need room to grow, well, for Prescott, it's a little different because the town's boundaries are so small. But certainly, taking the example of Augusta, if it were noted that there was an expected population increase, then certainly an increase to the settlement area would be readily supported. But generally speaking, that takes place at the time of an official plan review.
Okay, thank you very much, if I can. I think that I wasn't really looking for anything definitive to see if that had been considered, because my view of it, the way I'm slowly moving along learning, is that something you would deal with as it comes up. And as you mentioned, with the official plan, and Augusta's official plan is certainly ripe for review. I was going to say overdue, but I won't go that far, but certainly it's timely for it to be done, and so it prevents an opportunity. I have one question about the estimate for the office space, and I'm going to almost refer to my chair of the Economic Development and Tourism Committee that's in Augusta, and Mr. Annabelle, who is chair of Leasing Rental Professional Association, at one of the deputies' meetings indicated a strong need for space for small companies that are getting started, whether it's a plumbing company or a body shop or whatever, but there's a definite shortage of, and it was 10,000 square feet?
Less than 10,000.
Less than 10,000 square feet. And the Augusta Business Center is a prime example of it, just on the shared border here with Prescott. So did you look at that in terms of, is that part of the look at commercial opportunities, or is, when I looked at the building at, for example, there was a time in which we weren't sure that was going to be offices for businesses, or what it turned out to be some tremendous businesses there that are not involved in offices.
Yep, I'll respond to that. Our office demand forecast is sort of in a rural market. Looking at pure office demand is generally going to yield smaller numbers because there's a lot of crossover between other uses. And you mentioned some of the uses you mentioned there would fall under the light industrial business, because we would look at office based on the type of employment that it generates. So it statistically wouldn't fall under office, but there's a lot of gray area, especially in small towns where you can have your fabric of your street front may not be all retail at the ground floor. It has a mix of shops and services. It's a different sentiment. It's not as segregated as you will as looking at other markets where you might have an office precinct and in a town like Prescott, everything's mixed together, and that's part of the uniqueness and the fabric of it. So we would look at any type of infill space there that could accommodate office, and it could well include some of those categories like plumbing, where they might have the front might be a small showroom, and the back might be their space for storage or equipment, and it's a much more low intensity use. So we did look at that a little bit, just recognizing the nature of how smaller towns grow. And with office in particular, it's a challenging market right now. And there's probably what we would sometimes look at in a market like this is the ability to incubate and take some of the home-based businesses and bring them into shop front space or incubate them. But that market has slowed. A lot of people right now are just going to continue working out of their homes. So we realize that's going to be a slow uptick in that particular market. Does that answer your question?
It certainly does, and I just make certain that you're not viewing any of my questions as a criticism of the report. I'm still trying to get my mind totally around it. There's a lot of information in there, and each one it kind of excites you because it's another possibility. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mayor Malenka. Anything else from members of the worship? Please, Deputy Mayor.
Just on the implementation, you mentioned infrastructure upgrades. And this came up in our own economic development committee there today, is when you're planning a development or basically residential, one of the things you have to look at is fiber or internet. We all take hydro for granted. We know we can get hydro, just a matter of giving them a few dollars. But the internet is important, and that's a big factor. When people move to our area, they look at two things: internet and schools. So, I think we gotta put that in. It's one of the stars now, you might say, that has to be there. I live a few kilometers out of Prescott, and I tell you, if my phone rings, I'm off the internet. That's what happens. But it's not like being in the city of Ottawa or Montreal, Toronto, believe me. So anything we do outside of Prescott, we gotta keep that in mind. You looked at your focus area, and then you quickly went to the preferred focus area, which makes a lot of sense because neither municipality has those funds for water or sewer or getting it across the 401. So I'm glad we're kind of focused on the west side of Prescott, the south of the 401. I just want to say we also do have. Prescott also has Development Drive, which still could come through, and it wouldn't be a whole lot of dollars. It would depend on basically the number of potential businesses that want to come down that road. So to me, that's low-hanging fruit. It could happen quite easily, depending on business, and especially a recovery after the pandemic. And but the way I read this, it's a good report. And just kind of narrows it down. We got to start focusing, not the Maitland site. Let's get the low hanging fruit, which is, the way I see it, west of Prescott. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from? Okay, I'll move over to our side and open it up for councilors from the town of Prescott. Any comments, questions, observations? Start with Councilor Shankar.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. So I don't know who to address this to, but on page 12, the $6.4 million that you say is the cost associated with services across the 401. Is that for that whole area between Merwin Lane and it looks like probably Boundary Street or way over? Would that service that whole area? And secondly to that question, when I do the math, it says like over 75,000 per unit. What are we talking about units? Are we talking about a house? Or are we talking about industrial complex? And I count only 85 units. How did you get that number?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
EVB did generate the cost for the highway crossing. So the $6.4 million takes into account just the infrastructure that is required to get from where the water distribution systems and the wastewater collection system end in Prescott to Development Drive. And then they terminate there. So that would include all of your casings to go underneath the Highway 401 road, a wastewater pumping station, and then all the pipes that go into the ground. So that $6.4 million just covers the cost for the crossing itself. If you wanted to extend a distribution system or a wastewater collection system, it would be another add-on cost to that $6.4 million. So on section 7.1 of our report, we had used an estimate of 300 units in the greater area north of the Highway 401. So if we use that as a number, we were looking at an extra $21,000 per unit for the development of any of the units north of the 401 compared to extending services to the west. So right out of the gate, all of those units would be paying much more for the provision of municipal services than not having to cross the 401.
So are those 300 units through you? 300 units are 300 housing units?
Sorry, through you again. We use what they call equivalent households. So an equivalent household is calculated by taking how much water is being used or wastewater is being generated by the current users on the system and dividing it by the number of accounts so that we generate a usage of water per equivalent per household. So then for comparison purposes, we divide the available capacity by the number of equivalent household flow rate to come up with the number of equivalent households that can be serviced. So then we can take those 300 equivalent households and say a restaurant would be equivalent to 10 equivalent households, or the police station would be equivalent to 4, and divvy up the flow capacity in that manner.
Okay.
So we're not restricting what can go in. We're just saying this is what can be serviced.
Any follow-up, Gord?
Yeah, no, so that helps explain a few things to me. There was a question I had about the water. Hold on. Okay, so currently the Prescott water treatment plant evaluation, we have an ability to service 1,486 more, right? But our water pollution, which would be the sewage, can only do 802. So we're kind of limited by the lowest number, right? We can only do 802. The question I did have is the water storage deficit of 4,100 cubic meters. Is that going to be made up with a newer water tower? That's true?
Yes, that's correct. So the application that we made would be appropriately sized to be able to handle all of that additional storage.
If we go to the preferred site, which is west of Prescott and in Maitland, Merwin Lane, we can go up to 800 of those units that you mentioned earlier. That be my assumption.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, this wastewater treatment plant can support another 802 equivalent households. So where that growth will occur now has to be, well, it's been looked at through the the land needs study, and we've determined what kind of infill and intensification can occur within the town of Prescott. So some of that 802 equivalent households need to be allocated to the growth that's going to happen within the town. And then the town can then look at what excess capacity is available and determine where that growth can occur and how is it best to use that available capacity to service your neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions from Prescott? I see Councillor Young.
Thank you, Brett. Marco, on page 11 as well, that 62% caught my eye as well. That is a lower number than I have seen in past. And I think the difference is you were using the capacity that we are, or the amount that we're using at this moment, where the previous studies have looked at the amount that we are using plus saving an amount for future development. Am I making myself clear?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you are absolutely correct. What I wanted to do, and the whole purpose of the land need study, was to identify what required capacity there would be for the infill and intensification within the town of Prescott. So I didn't want to start off by making an assumption that you have to commit so much of your capacity for that infill unless we can demonstrate that that infill can happen.
Okay. Obviously, we don't have the ability to build 1,486 units in Prescott, I don't think. Do you have a number that you looked at as part of this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do believe it's contained in the land need study. I'm just trying to find what section it's in.
Anyway, you probably know the point that I'm getting to. Supposing we have 200 empty lots in town. Before we commit 1,400 units to our neighbors, we have to keep the 200 units in town for our own growth within the town, do we not?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. If you refer to the land needs study in section 12 of the report, there is a figure 28, which is the excess capacity in the Prescott water treatment plant. And what it does is it takes into consideration what infill and intensification is required within the town of Prescott. So we're looking at another 300 residential lots plus 20 hectares of land within the town boundaries to be developed for industrial and commercial purposes. So then what this table suggests is that there, for the water plant, there's now 917 equivalent households that can be serviced outside of the town. And if you refer to figure 29, it provides the same information for the wastewater or the water pollution control plant. So once you have serviced or provide the service to your own infill intensification, as well as your proposed industrial and commercial growth, there is now only 126 equivalent households that the current infrastructure can service outside of the town boundaries.
Okay. I think that illustrates the point that I was concerned about, that 62% doesn't look like very much, but when you consider what we may have going on in the near future, we're well over 62% already, just by growth that we're talking about right now. So we don't have, in my opinion, 1,486 units that we can service outside the town. We have a large number, and I'm guessing now, Marco, 900 is closer to that number?
That's correct for the water system and 126 for the wastewater system.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other comments? Councillor McConnell, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. On page 12. Last one here. I'm sorry, on page 13, your SWOT analysis. One of the paragraphs here says extensions of several existing streets in Prescott would provide better, safer pedestrian and vehicle connectivity to existing services and amenities located within Prescott. As a longtime resident of the west end of Prescott, I take huge issue with that, and I can't think of any good reason why we would extend our streets westward into Augusta Township. I am completely in favor of developing that and adding houses there. Excuse me. But the streets that go past Sophia Street, which is the most western north-south street, are all dead-end streets. When you live in a dead-end street, you have a certain expectation of quietness, less traffic. By making those into through streets, you've taken that away from the people of the town of Prescott. Not only that, you've added traffic into residential streets where you add traffic from a new subdivision that's on a collector street. And those aren't collector streets. They're not made for heavy traffic. It seems to me that if you were going to give an exit into Prescott from that area, the sensible thing to do would be to extend Hyde Street, which is the most northern street south of the tracks that runs through Prescott. It doesn't extend past Sophia Street. It would be a good collector to add on. Anybody going north from that area would be able to go north without going through the residential area. And then an exit directly onto King Street, or which would be number 2 highway, would be the way to access the south commercial area. Both of those things would take the traffic out of the residential area, which is essentially where you folks have put it right now. So I would definitely not be in favor of that. I think that would have to be looked at. And only that, if you just ran those streets straight through, that's, to me, unnecessarily handicapping any developer who might have a different idea of how we wanted to lay out the streets in that area. So I think that's something that our council would have to look at before we looked at any further development up there. And I think we would have to take a good look at it from our own residents' standpoint. And the other thing I'd like to point out, and this is just an observation, it's not a question that I need an answer to, excuse me, whenever we decide things like how many residences we're going to add on out of town or even in town that are going to access our sewage and our water systems, we have to, even though they're not here, consider the elephant in the room, or I guess it would be the elephant that's not in the room, and that's our neighbors to the east, because we already provide them with sewer and water in a certain area. And if all of a sudden they are looking for development down in their industrial park, as we all know. And if they should happen to lock onto something that has a lot of employment, it could throw our plans, well, not out the window, but it could mean that all of a sudden our sewage treatment plant has to be expanded in order to accommodate one or the other. And that's a many-year process. That's not just something you do overnight. So whatever we do here, we really have to consider the neighbor to the east. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor John.
Thank you very much. Other comments, questions from members of Prescott Council? Everybody good? Okay, just a couple things I want to touch on. Just random comments, really going through the presentation, and thanks again to DV Insight for doing such a good job with this. Just quick comment on page 9. I do know inventory of vacant and underutilized lands. Another bit of an elephant in the room. We've got a lot of privately owned property here in the area. Sometimes that's good that we're looking at because it gives us the opportunity to engage with private developers, but sometimes it's bad because, you know, we have seen developers hold on to property in the area. Sometimes, not going to mention any certain areas, but we all know a few of them around both councils that have been problematic. So that is something that has to be turned into more of an opportunity. And I think that will require some real engagement with private owners and private developers. When we had our meeting of our task force last year, I know Jeff really mentioned this about the idea of getting out there and engaging with developers and using tonight as a platform, a springboard to go after these people. And I think that's absolutely correct. I hope everybody that is paying attention to this realizes we are open for business. This is the start of dialogue. We're not saying no to anything right now. We want to hear from private developers and see how they can help us better our communities with growth, no matter what it is. Let's hear options. So if there's any message that gets out from this tonight, I hope that's the primary one, because I think we're all united and we want to grow and we want to improve our quality of life. Moving on to page 11, this is going to be a problematic issue. Ray obviously really got to the heart of it, but we are going to have to look at the capacity in both the water pollution plant and the water treatment plant. We obviously have limits there with both facilities. Sewer is much more problematic. It's also a lot more expensive just because it's heavier to move around. I won't go into any further details, but we all know what we're talking about. It requires pumping stations. It requires a lot more infrastructure work. So that can be more of a challenge than the water, where the pipes with water can go farther distances for fewer dollars. But there are options with those modular systems like Nuterra and so forth. So I think there's a way that, you know, again, I'll go back to dialogue. We can talk about different options, but what I want to hear out of this are actual options. I want somebody to come in and propose, hey, I want to build 300 houses wherever. And then we have to get together then as both municipalities and decide how we're going to do that. Edwardsburg Cardinal is another question, but I will say they are not entitled to any capacity of the plants. There are numbers there where when we hit a certain threshold, Matt, fill me in if I'm misstating this in any way, but when they hit a certain threshold there with sewer, they have to pay for the engineering regarding the expansion of that plant, correct? And there's still a ways from that though, correct? So we do have, you know, and this would be a good problem to have. We could run into it really quickly if somebody hears this tonight and decides they're going to throw a whole pile of houses and whatever else in Prescott and Augusta. This could be something we've got to answer really quickly. But right now, I think it'd be a good problem to have, because I think we can dialogue about this. And the other thing I will note that for job creation, there is the aspect, if there's commercial tied in with any of this, there is the EODF that does provide funding with regards to expansion of services when jobs are connected. We did receive funding for that a few years ago from the EODF for the old wood pellet plant. That unfortunately did not go through, but we also have basically that entire area that the wood pellet plant was going to go to. That's sold out now. And we already see, if anyone drives back there, you'll see the first evidence with Blacks Creek building a huge building back there, actually much bigger than I think any of us had anticipated, even though we did see the plans. I won't say we didn't see it, but that's exciting to see that growth. And that's just the tip of the iceberg there. So there is a possibility of securing funds for this sort of development. But again, this is something we're going to have to really look at, because we're going to have to decide internally in Prescott how much we dedicate to development outside. And that's a discussion we're going to have. There are some, you know, there's going to be some delicate discussions here about all of this. And I think, you know, it's going to come down to, is that western section, if there is interest on that moving right away, do we turn that down in Prescott, even though it's ostensibly outside of our borders? And then that brings down to exactly what Lee mentioned. And I will say that, you know, I agree with him on a fair bit of what he said. If we're extending streets directly, that's a real serious discussion we have to have with regards to the water sewer servicing, the fire protection, the connection through to Merwin Lane. I mean, I actually like the idea of driving those streets through to Merwin Lane, but that does also indicate that the natural border of Prescott is probably more correctly Merwin Lane. And then that's a discussion about how we all share the revenue and what that looks like going forward. You know, that's going to be a longer term discussion. I'm not saying I have any firm agreements, opinions on this. I know the gentleman with MDB did mention that they have case studies on this. I'd love to look at those. And if there are ways we can make this happen, we just have to talk it through and keep working together until we can make it happen, because we need this sort of development, whether it's inside the borders or outside the borders of Prescott. We need to grow the size of this region. And I think we can do it, but there are going to be some tough questions that are going to have to be asked and answered with all of that. On page 13, the servicing from the north side, I will note, and Jeff actually already touched on this, but I wouldn't set aside, I know it's higher servicing costs. I think we were over 4 million. Ray, correct me, because we had numbers on this early on. Remember, I think it was around 4 million. That's gone up. Hasn't gone up as much as I thought it might, but 6.4 just to get the pipes across. That's challenging, but it's not a bridge too far if we have commercial and industrial on the other side to help with that. And if we can piggyback this on the existing sales and what may be happening at the private land on the west side, or sorry, the east side of the North 401, you know, there's potential real job growth across that whole area. And if we can get support, whether it's EODF, whether it's more private development, maybe you do make sense and you cut down the cost of units and you open up all the housing to the north side there. That is a place we can get servicing across. We've still got limits with the systems, but I think that those are some good questions that we have to ask on that one. So as much as there are higher costs to get under that 401, boy, it opens up so much residential into Augusta for our whole area. And I'm not making any, please don't take this as any grand plan to expand Prescott, but if you look at that greater Prescott area, just focused on around Prescott, whether part of it's in Augusta, part of it's in Prescott, you could double the population size of the town pretty damn easily going north and going west. And that's what I think we need to look at here, because it benefits all of us. And I'll say for the people in Augusta that are further out that may not want this or may not care about it, it's going to keep your taxes down and it's going to improve growth and it's going to enable us to bring more and more industries in. I know I was a part of that whole Acquire deal, which was awesome. It's in Brockville, but it benefits all of us. But the biggest issue that always comes up with every single one of these deals, and Doug knows because this stuff comes up at, and Jeff's been to a lot of corridor meetings as well. That's the first question. Do you have the manpower? And right now, that's a tough question to answer because we don't. We're a retirement area. We have to get back to the 55 plus. Awesome. Pretty much all of us around the table are 55 plus. So, I mean, we can't say anything against it. It's a great area for retirees and people moving towards retirement. But we need younger people as well. And if we don't get this kind of growth, we're not going to get the Leclercs, the expansions, the Northern Cables, the Can-Arms, all that stuff. And there's a lot there that can happen. So as much as I agree with almost everything that's in here, I would not cross anything off the list, including getting the expansion across the 401. Same with the 2030 demand forecast. It's great that you guys put that together, but what we've seen the last couple of years, I mean, go back 24 months. Anybody here want to bet that houses in the area are going to be valued about $425,000? I mean, things can change really rapidly. So demand forecasts, I do wonder about. I've already spoken on that, and I think I'm good. But I do want to thank everybody. Anybody else have any other words before we move back to Mr. Blaze? Doug, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on some of the observations that were made. First of all, I think it's important that we talk about Edwardsburg Cardinal. When I mentioned in my introductory remarks that this process goes back to 2010 and then revived in 2018, Edwardsburg Cardinal was invited to the table. And certainly in 2010, they were enthusiastic with regard to the tourism through the Chamber of Commerce. For whatever the reasons were, they chose not to continue with our thinking. It simply can be that the timing isn't right, the circumstances are right. I don't make a judgment, but looking forward, my eyes forward-looking says, at some point in time, it's going to be to their advantage to be part of this. And it's going to be to our advantage too, because clearly with the huge successes, we're going to have to be looking at extra capacity of water and sewage and everything. I mean, and you raise some of the questions that residents of Prescott are going, may object to or may be in favor of. It's recognized that as we sort of bump together for this partnership, there's going to be a lot of tough issues. And we're just, as long as the willingness is there and that spirit of fairness and equality, we'll figure it out. Because as we move forward, I think it'll become increasingly obvious to our population, to our respective residences, that this is a good thing. And they're going to see it in terms of there being more opportunity for whether it's recreation, whether it's culture, sports, events, medical areas. I mean, I know you're getting into the big dream, but the more that this town grows, the more services become available to the residents of Augusta and to the residents of Prescott. And we're looking to try and beef up or increase the residential development to try and replace that tax money that was lost with plants leaving, like Augusta. I remember for Augusta, the DuPont plant was providing 30% of taxes, 30 to 35% at its heyday. It's down to 5% now. That's got to be made up some way. And so, there's a necessity to do this. And I think sitting at the end of the 416 has a lot of promise for us. And the last comment I'd like to make is, and it's almost for the public that we know that's looking. From time to time, I get the comment saying, don't rush this too fast. And I think the comment you're making that collectively is, we're not going to rush this fast. We're going to be thinking it through carefully and slowly and making certain that we're touching all the bases for both communities to work. Because if it doesn't, it fails. I mean, I recall that there used to be an economic development group that represented all of South Grenville. It failed. Why? It stopped meeting the needs. I'm from conversations I've had with people in the past. I wasn't there, I don't know, but the anecdotal information I have is that people stopped caring about the organization working as a unit, and everybody just appeared and went on their own ways. These things need care and attention the whole way through. And so I'm encouraged, but I recognize there's a lot of issues to be faced. And I'm sure our residents are going to raise some concerns that they have. And I know one of them is going to be how we're going to protect the nature, the agricultural nature. And so from my perspective, when we're looking at economic development, we're having conversations with our villages and hamlets to say, what do you want? So if the word is keep your development in a specified area of the township, well, that's what council is going to have to be respecting. But to the extent that for example, North Augusta or Roebuck sees a desire, a need, advantage for them for our township, and that's why you have the plan being Augusta's, Prescott's, and joint, is that we will help our villages and communities to do whatever they think is advantageous. And we know there's interest, but it's going to be done carefully and paying attention to our needs. You're paying attention to your needs. I still think we can make it work.
Thanks, Doug. I have Councilor Burton.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I'm more of a forward-thinking person. Let's not count out either the west or the north end. And one thing that we haven't touched on is we are a commuter town, and in a municipality, people want to get out of the big cities and come to the rural area or the small town. And we have the best of both worlds here. So let's not, just look at both ends of the spectrum, look at the north end, look at the west end, and just keep that in mind when we're during our conversations. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Good conversation. We touched on some real key items here, and I just wanted the one thing that we haven't really gotten heavily into, and I'll just mention it briefly because it's we talk about houses, development, even water and sewer, which is really saying something when water and sewer is actually sexier than the other part of this. And that's the planning part of it. And we do need everything that we're talking about here. We've touched on it really briefly, but we have to make sure that our planning documents, our OP, our zoning, everything are as in line as possible. And there are some disparities now that have been identified in our task force. And we all know that we've got to get onto a level playing field there, because that's how you attract the interested developers as well that don't want to look at that. They don't want to deal with invisible lines. They want a nice development that actually takes into the land and into account the land they want without having to worry about property X is and different standards than property Y. We don't want that. That is going to be a challenge to deal with in some ways, especially when you're talking about extending town streets. Like Councillor McConnell is correct. That's a very sensitive issue, and it's something we really have to look at. But as long as we talk about it, I think we're going to get to a place where we need to be. It's all about just discussions. I mean, that's all it is here. And the other thing, specter in the room, I guess, is also, although I don't mean to put it quite that way, is United Counties. Doug did mention it earlier. We've got to remember we're single tier here, but Augusta is in the county system as a lower tier reporting to the upper. So a lot of this is going to have to involve United Counties and working there because Augusta has to have their OP and different policies run through the counties. That said, I've never heard there's certainly no objections at the county's level for what we're doing. If anything, other mayors in the area have been very supportive of what we are doing here. But that is another layer here that's going to have to be looked at as we move forward. It can't just be totally decided by our two councils. We've got the province too, of course, because you've got to have everything reviewed with the OP, and counties has that Augusta has that extra step with counties. But again, nothing's impossible. We're all friends here, and we're all just going to talk through the issues until we get to where we need to go.
If I can, it's a little like Minister Clark said at his beginning, that this is, we're developing new grounds here, and we're learning, and our relationship with the counties and how we align our OP with theirs is going to be important. But just that comment I made about the aggregate lands, when the group at counties looked at the aggregate lands and the concerns of most of the municipalities within Leeds and Grenville, in that we're mostly, there's a huge majority of the land is earmarked for aggregate lands. Well, we suddenly learned that when you're looking closer at the legislation, there are provisions for, I'll call it wiggle room, in the sense that it's got to make sense from a provincial level, but at the same time, it's got to make sense for us. So we're just going to have to walk through. And one of the strengths of the partnership is that we've got the ear of government to be speaking as one. I think as long as we have a government like the one we have right now that is truly listening to what rural needs are and a true interest in helping us to get ahead, that's a hell of a ally to have. I'm very encouraged by it, frankly.
And I guess the other thing really quickly is you mentioned about speed and not rushing into it. We don't want to rush into this, but I'll be blunt. I'm speaking for the whole area. I'm talking Leeds, Grenville, and Eastern Ontario overall. So this is no criticism directed at anyone around the table, but this whole region's never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity going back a good long time. We're not growing the way that we should across Eastern Ontario overall. We're seeing it into the areas around Ottawa now. I heard from on a mayor's caucus meeting last week. The mayor of Smith Falls mentioned tremendous growth in Smith Falls now that I quite frankly wasn't aware of. That connects back into Ottawa and what's going on in North Grenville. But if what Mayor Pankow's, and I have no reason to doubt Sean, if what he's saying is correct, they've got growth going on in Smith Falls. It's far beyond what North Grenville's experiencing right now. And all I could say to Sean after that is, boy, I want a piece of some of that. I mean, I'm not saying we have to explode overnight and become a suburb of Ottawa, because nobody wants that, but we've got to get to that sustainable development. And while I don't want to rush this, I do think we have to make sure, because we've got the momentum, we've got people around the table now that want to talk, even if we don't have everything carved in stone by the end of this term, and I don't think that we will, we have to have this set up so this momentum and this drive and this energy goes beyond the current council term and is something permanent, as much as anything can be permanent when it comes to municipal politics, that it just continues on regardless of the people around the table. So people have to continue with the dialogue, because this is really valuable and it's the only way we continue to grow. Before we move on, just to staff, Matt, Steve, anything you guys wanted to add on this in terms of the land needs policy? Anything additional we haven't touched on?
I think one thing that I mentioned is that some of the investments that are needed can be incremental. So a great example is the wastewater treatment plant was originally constructed in a way that a whole other pond could be added. which would increase its capacity by 1/3. So when we're having a discussion, what is the available capacity? There's also ways to make incremental increases without it costing, $10, $15 million to achieve that capacity. So those are some of the things that I just want to make a point of, that it's not once you reach capacity, it's a whole new ballgame. It's, where do we go from there? Where do we make the strategic investment? How do we move that forward? So these are just some of the comments I want to point out.
Steve,
Nothing at this time, thanks.
Thanks. Excellent point on that. And of course, we've got the engineers that have already provided the information here. So whenever time comes to ask those questions, we've got the brain power around and we've laid the groundwork for that already. Gory?
Since you mentioned that, I just have one more question, Marco. I'm not picking on you tonight, but I have one more question. So when I'm looking on page 18 at the new South Service Road, and I know that there's been some talk about expanding the highway to 6 lanes. Would that South Service Road be viable with that expansion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely. With all of the potential developments that could occur on Merwin Lane, there could be a significant traffic coming from the west to something like an Aqua World. So they're going to need access to those properties. So by having an interchange at Blue Church Road and then a South Service Road, it provides the benefit to get access to those properties. The other benefit it would provide is that on the north side of your 401, you currently have your emergency detour road, and it goes through a lot of your residential areas. So if you were to propose a South Service Road between Blue Church and the industrial park that's currently in Prescott, you would remove that potential to have all the excess traffic on the north side of the road and bring it to the south side through less residentially intensified areas.
Very good, thank you.
The timing of that with the ramp is going to be probably the key one. However, if they agreed to this, you've got to work the ramp in, and that's going to be the challenge timing wise, because, well, we don't really know a full-time schedule on that yet when they're going to be looking at that. As we know, what came to council was a couple of weeks ago. Was it 10 to 15 years? And we're at the far end of that work that's coming from the west. So that could be a challenge right there on the ramp to build this in. But that said, if the road was permitted, maybe that could be jump-started because there's good reason to do so. Any other comments from this first opening section this evening? Great discussion, everyone. This was great stuff. So Paul, we'll put it back, give it back over to you for a look at the actual ECDEV action plan.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I've been appreciating the conversation, especially the notion that that Prescott and Augusta are experiencing some great economic change. I would say all of Eastern Ontario is experiencing that. I started my economic development career working for the Kingston Area Economic Development Commission in 1995, and then spent 7 years working for Lennox and Addington County in economic development. And the early 2000s were rough on Eastern Ontario. There were a lot of closures and a really sort of somewhat more depressed economy than the rest of Ontario. But I think over the last 5 years in particular, I've seen incredible change along 401 communities, those communities near Ottawa, both in terms of industrial investment, but also just the attention that Eastern Ontario is getting for its great recreational and quality of life features is becoming a real destination for new homeowners, but also visitors. And I guess we aim to build off of those the common traits in the economic development strategies for Augusta and Prescott with this joint economic development action plan. And I'll turn it over to Clark, who's going to describe the directions that we're recommending for you.
Thank you, Paul. And while you're pulling up the presentation, thank you to Mayor Todd and Mayor Malenka and the councils for this opportunity to chat with you tonight. Although we're at near the end of the presentation, the Joint Economic Development Action Plan, I think we see as the beginning of the next steps of the relationship, or not of the relationship between the two municipalities, but maybe helping to formalize that economic development effort in more tangible ways. And I think the important thing to reflect on in terms of all these discussions tonight is that forward-thinking economic development starts with understanding what each community needs and wants, and then building on that trust and moving into collaboration. And so I think part of the process for the entire project was that the original proposal asked us to come up with some proposed vision statements and mission statements for the two municipalities. And well, I don't see the necessity of digging into the weeds on these this evening, but I think that as the two municipalities move forward, it's important for you to look at these proposed statements and think about where you're wanting to go together. So like Paul on the next slide, the mission statement, these are pretty simple statements, but it's always important to reflect back to what your initial goals are. On the next slide, Paul, if you may, if you look at the overall project, there's been a really thorough analysis, as you know, of these two municipalities. So we start with that land needs analysis. We built out separate economic development strategies for each of the municipalities. And now we're looking at the commonalities between them. And with any proper economic development strategy, one of the key areas is business retention and expansion. It's all about, who's in your community now and building on that. And there are probably two common priorities and two joint tactics that, Prescott and Augusta can do immediately. You can check them off your list soon, is establishing some sort of joint advisory team or task force that will enable that communication to be more formal, for ways for you to kind of reinforce each other's messages and priorities. So that's a basic thing. And it really allows your business community to see that you are working together. It shows your partners and neighboring municipalities and across the region that you're also collaborating and you're trusting each other. And so that's a key thing to build upon. So these are just a few bullet points from the larger document that talk about business retention and expansion. On the next slide, we talk about investment attraction. And really here, this is about investment readiness. It's about making sure you have your policies in place. It's making sure that you have that infrastructure, that your protocols and your processes are working in alignment, and also that you're working together, as you've mentioned several times tonight, of getting the ear of those senior levels of government, of maximizing the partnerships with your regional partners. The United Counties is one example, but the St. Lawrence Corridor, the Ontario East group, you have a variety of partners that the two of you working together can leverage to really maximize the investment attraction opportunities. So these are just a few examples of common priorities in the investment attraction area. And then the third kind of pillar on the next slide is the whole idea of tourism development and attracting residents to the area. Here we can, the two municipalities can work together on, maybe jointly upgrading some signage or some amenities that can help with tourism or with residents. Coming up with some sort of welcome package to work with your businesses to recruit more workforce. And again, these are regional type of ideas that you can work with other regional partners on. I think too, not to be too clever about the actual joint action plan, it does talk in the executive summary about a diving analogy. And I want to remind your two municipalities that you are so lucky to have the unique opportunity of diving assets in your community that you should not forget about them. And so this is an important thing that we're recommending is if you're going to collaborate on some sort of tourism initiative, don't forget what's unique about you and the fact that you do have a leg up on many other communities when it comes to this area. And so then finally, just, in terms of that tourism development side, and it also relates to resident attraction, is just joint marketing materials, working together on some sort of joint website perhaps, or maybe just having a part of each of your websites that promotes each other. So there's lots of areas that the communities can work together. And I would say is the Joint Economic Development Action Plan, ultimately, if you set this aside, this 3-page presentation aside to a year from now, you should be able to, January 31st, 2023, be able to see that you've checked off some of these joint action plans, and it will really help to show the region and your business community that you are intentional about what you want to do together, and that you have a forward-thinking attitude, and that you'll find ways around the obstacles that may be there. So, as I said, thank you for this opportunity. This is kind of the shortest part of the presentation, but I would say it's one of the most important parts because it's all about the two communities collaborating and the two councils and staff working together. So with that, good luck and thank you, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. So we'll handle this same as we did the last time. I'll turn it over to Mayor Malenka to take us through if either he or his members of council have any comments, questions on this portion of the presentation tonight.
I don't really have any questions. I appreciate the detail that goes into it to demonstrate the possibilities and direction for getting there. And so it's, as I said, many of these ideas I started to formulate back in 2010, and my continued relationship over the years with Prescott, discussions with the mayor here. And now we have something that says, here's how we can get to it. And so I'm enthusiastic. So I really don't have any questions at this time. I think we're going to have to get into the discussion about how we involve this task force, because we've got the high level ideas and now we got to get down to the detail slowly. And I think that's the next part of the discussion, but I'll invite any of my council here if you wish to comment on anything you read with regard to that portion of it, the tourism. Question. The only thing I'll say that, and I'll put it out there because again, members of the public may be listening, and hopefully they are, that Augusta regards County Road 2 as being high potential for becoming part of the tourism attraction here. We have the village of Maitland, which is very historic, and is just ripe for waiting for any student that wants to read Richard Dumbrell's book on the stones of Maitland. They could do a walking tour, and he's written the book on where you would go and what you would say. But more than that, we have Philip Ling, who was an investor from Toronto, was one of the cyclists going along County Road 2 past the tower site in Maitland. And this sort of the story goes, he had made an offer on the property before he got to Cornwall. He has huge hopes for that property and something that would lead to a great attraction. And also when I think of County Road 2, I think of that beautiful site of the river that you have for kilometers. And unless you're in an area where you don't have that, you don't appreciate it. And so for tourism, I just point out that that's an area where I would like to see some emphasis. And I think you've already indicated, and to develop them further is just going to be a matter as we go along and talk about our joint plans and how we can work it together. There's lots of opportunity here. So I'll leave that with you and your council.
Thanks, Doug. So all good from the side of the table? Thanks, everyone. I'll move it over to the Prescott side, and any comments, questions on this section of the presentation tonight. Councilor Ostrander.
Well, I'd just like to say that this was very informative tonight. You can read these things till you're blue in the face, but until they expand on them and tell you the actual direction and sort of the pitfalls that might be along the way, it makes it a much more wide-ranging presentation of it, and perhaps we're a little wiser as to what lies ahead, really. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Anyone else on the Prescott side? Councilor McConnell, please.
I'm just looking, pardon me. I was just looking at some of the adjectives here on page 23 and 24. and, well, adjectives, the terminology is joint, secure, alignment, advocate, maximize, collaborate. All that means is we work together. We continue working together, and Brad, I had to laugh when you made that comment about passing up no opportunity to drop the ball a while ago, because you're right, the ball has to drop many times. But I think it's important to note that this is an election year for all of us. And quite often in an election year, we come into summer and we hit the end of June and that's it. Everybody goes away for the summer. They take the summer off. They do whatever they're going to do. This year, we're going to have an election. So that happens in October. By the time the new council, which may consist of a bunch of the old council, takes office, strikes their committees, very often nothing gets done until after Christmas. And we have a bouncing ball here with this right now, and I think I would like to see it continue to bounce through the summer. So we all still get paid through the summer. And those of us who are going to run for election, if we get elected again, we're getting paid through the Christmas holidays. So I don't think there should be a problem with continuing to work on this, putting hours in this in, just because it's summer. Just because it's an election year, we shouldn't let the ball quit bouncing. We should keep it going. And that way, after the election shakes out, we're already running. We don't have to hit the ground running because we're already running. So thanks. That's all I have to say about it.
Thank you very much. Councilor Burton.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I think just to echo what Councilor McConnell was saying, I think we do need to get our pens out, right to the paper, put stuff in black and white, get this joint economic development advisory team in place, and let's get going, and let's get started. I mean, this is a start here tonight, but let's take the next few steps and get it going. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from our side here this evening? Gory?
I like this economic development action plan. I think, we have Dana on our side who has done a remarkable job in Prescott. I think if we can put our two staffs together, we can, maybe even, we've just secured a new website. Maybe we have linking to Augusta's website, like our properties for sale. We are working together, to trying to recruit industry to come to our area. We can share that on our websites, have the similar type of idea. So I think, there's stuff that can be done. It can be done all through the summer and all through the fall. I agree. We should, we got the momentum. We finally had this in-person collaborative meeting. Let's just keep it going. So I'm good with that.
Thank you. Other comments? Ray, you've been quiet for a while.
No, Brett, I think the evening went very well, and I'm very pleased. Always the low-hanging fruit should be the ones that pick first, and once we see the success of a few things, that will push us on even more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So anything else from anyone this evening on what we've discussed? We've got 8 and 9 are focused discussion roundtable. I think we've pretty much done that, unless anybody wants to add anything else. But I will open it up. Any further discussion on anything?
Doug? Just it goes back to the last meeting we had a few days ago, and I'm at the point with meetings, I'm forgetting which day it was. But essentially, we are, as a task force, being the mayors, CAOs, and deputy mayors, meet sort of a high level of ideas of where can we take this. And we both recognized at the last meeting that we do need this task force that's involving councillors. And so I'm really anxious that we get going on that. Not quite sure how it all folds out, but I think that is an objective, quickly to start ferreting out all these ideas, finding out what is truly achievable in a short time, and doing, as you say, Lee, all the things that make this a lasting project. And I think the suggestion down on your side of really focusing on mutual or joint communications, I think is absolutely key. Get the message out there. I always remember when the corridor was getting going and it was kind of, what do we need to do when someone suggested we got to create a buzz. We got to be in the traffic and we got to get noticed. And I think that's an early goal for us.
A very, very good point. And I think with that task force, it's done good work. I think it'll continue to do good work, but everything comes back to the full two councils, both when it comes to, and I think our next meeting of that joint task force, we have to look at a little bit and what staff would recommend is what's workable to move this forward. I'm going to really go back to what Leanne just mentioned about getting things going quickly, and Lee mentioned as well. I think we're all on the same page. We want to get the groundwork laid. There's a lot of things here that aren't like CRM system for the region, Joint Economic Development Advisory Team. One of the bullet points is communicate to each other. I mean, I think we can handle that. There's a lot here that I think is really low-hanging fruit. We need to just get these organizations, these groups meeting together, recruit some people within the community as well for that Joint Ec Dev Advisory Team. I know I've spoken to a couple members of the corridor already. We did have Charlie Mignot at our joint meeting, our task force meeting last week. Talked to Charlie earlier today. He's looked over everything and he has some real good concrete ideas, both regarding housing attraction and of course industrial commercial. So I think working with the corridor is a big positive there. So I think a lot of this can be secured in relatively short order. So if that group can get back together, bring recommendations back, and I think we should also be looking as soon as possible at another joint meeting of the councils, with Augusta hosting this time, and let's just keep this momentum going. If we've got to meet monthly as a council now, or every 2 months, whatever, we are going to run out of time, and it will be a shorter year than usual with the election and so on. There's unfortunately no way to completely get past that with rules and regulations around the elections. So we're going to have to look at that. And I think we take that back to the joint group and then everything comes back to the councils. But I really would like to see this happening on a regular basis for the rest of this term and hopefully beyond, because that's good when we all get together, just to have these sorts of evenings. And as long as Omicron and COVID cooperate, I probably nothing wouldn't to knock on here, but hopefully we're into a better time there and we can meet in person, because meeting like this so much better. Like tonight was a lot better than if we were all, apologies to those on the screen, but being in a room together, it's just so much better. So if everyone's okay with that, I think that's a good way forward. But one thing I am going to suggest tonight, and I should have brought this up earlier, but I'm going to throw it out there. We've got a proposed vision and a proposed mission statement. And for people out there, the vision statement just reads: the Town of Prescott and the Township of Augusta are forward-thinking communities with individually unique opportunities that collaborate on common initiatives to sustain a robust regional economy and an environment of healthy residents, a high quality of life, and a positive future for all generations and walks of life. That's the vision statement. The mission statement, similarly, but a little more to the point, is through mutual respect and collaboration, the Town of Prescott and the Township of Augusta collectively marshal their political, administrative, regional, and local community resources to lead effective initiatives that deliver tangible, sustainable benefits to the economy. I'd be happy to hear a motion on that tonight, that we accept these two and we use this as the basis to move forward, because I think these are really good vision and mission statements. So I'll open it up if anyone did want to make that motion. And
a motion, but almost a point of order in the sense of getting advice from our clerks here. I asked the question because I was thinking the same thing. I'll have a motion to adopt these because I think they fit the conversations we've had so far. But I asked the question, can we in a joint meeting be adopting motions that are binding on both townships? So almost if we had a motion from this group that said we recommend to respective councils to pass something at their next, or to pass a motion that adopts these. I think that's, keeps it in order what my clerks tell me. Don't wander from the rules. So I would certainly make that motion that we, as a group here, pass that. Each of our councils will look at this and hopefully pass it as a resolution at our next meeting.
Waters it down a touchdown, but I do agree that we'd probably be back to that anyways. I think we can approve it here, but also approve it individually at our own councils as well. But if we get, approval here, I think obviously we've got a majority, we're only missing 2 members. So, but I would ask though, because we're sort of joint chairing, I'll put it out to the councilors tonight if we could have a mover and seconder, if everyone's interested in this tonight. Doesn't commit us to anything, but I think there's some wise words here that do sort of outline where we want to go. So moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by, and there I am, just Councillor Henry, geez. Apologies for that. So any further discussion tonight?
I wasn't trying to water it down.
Yeah, no, I know.
I'm mindful of what clerks are saying you can do and you can't do. But I certainly regard that anything we agree to here is really a commitment that you're going to do it. There's no pointless of having discussions here and then go to your council and change your mind.
Yeah,
it's a solid reason.
I think it's a morale statement. It's a statement that those of us here at the table tonight. And if someone wants to tell us we've got to pass it again at council, I'm good with that.
Sounds good.
Just a closing comment, if I may.
Sure.
And I think it just proves that we want to reach the same goals, right? We want to end up in the same spot together.
McConnell?
I tend to agree with you. They're both well written and I like them both, but what are the mission statements for? This is no legal entity. What right do we have to pass a mission statement or a vision statement for a joint council? This is not an elected body. It's not an appointed body. I'm not against it. I'm just saying.
We can just bring it back to the councils as well.
Can I add a comment to that? Lee, I've thought about this a lot. And one of the things that I want to make certain is that I'm well connected with my residents. They know as a head of council and as a councillor where we're going. And I think when someone says, what the hell are you guys doing this for? What's your aim? It's here. And I really love the idea that it talks about the health and quality of life and positive future for generations of people. In my time as mayor, I've sought out positions such as chair of the Board of Health, a director on Connect Youth, attending anything United Way or any others, because I want to have the sense of what are the needs in my community. And there's no question that there will be a portion that says we're doing okay and we don't need change and don't go too fast. I don't really want to see a lot of change. There's another facet of the population that really needs to get into an area where they have an opportunity for better jobs, higher salaries, just a brighter, smarter outlook on what's available in their community. 2 things struck me when I was at Connect Youth, a survey that they did where a lot of the youth were saying, I don't feel like I have a role in my community. That's a huge gap. That's a question of, is there enough vibration going in your community? You say, yeah, that's my township. And the other that makes me sad is when I attend, when we could before COVID, the graduations of seeing the ones that were graduating, were heading out of our area. And the minute they go to university outside of our area, there's a good chance they're not coming back, at least until later in their life. So if anybody says to me, why are you doing this? This is what I point to. This represents what's driving me to try and find the direction that works well for the community and for our greater community, being both our municipalities.
Any further discussion? Mike?
These statements are good advertising too. If you have a tourist brochure or an ad for your town or something, you can always see them at the bottom or something, and they pick your attention right away.
And I would say it's a very fitting way to end what has been a very positive discussion tonight. It's been a good meeting. We've touched on a lot of good areas, and I'll let the CAOs, if we have to pass something again at our councils, I think we're more than capable of doing that. But with that this evening, I think they're good vision and mission statements. We do have the motion and the second, so I will call the question. All in favor? Thanks, everyone. So we do have like 8, 9, and 10 closing statements. I really don't have any closing. Doug, did you have anything you wanted to touch on before we just?
I'm just so delighted that this meeting's taking place and that we've had an opportunity as council.
Okay. Anything else from anyone tonight before we close off? Just want to thank everyone for attending. Want to thank all our consultants. Want to thank Ray out there in TV land for beaming in tonight. But again, thanks to staff too. This has really been it's an exciting evening. Thanks everybody for coming with such great ideas, with such good concepts, and it was fantastic that it worked out. We were able to do it in person too, as Lee mentioned off the top. It's nice to be able to take the masks off and look everybody face to face and actually have a good, friendly, real council meeting tonight that doesn't take place over Zoom. So thanks everyone, and with that, I will ask for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Shankar, seconded by someone from the Augusta Deputy Mayor Shaver. All those in favor? We are.